On a blistering summer day in Texas, Charlotte Dawson, a single mother, found herself driving down a dusty, remote highway when her car suddenly sputtered to a stop. Sweat trickled down her brow as she stepped out into the relentless heat. As she popped the hood open, she immediately saw the issue: the engine had overheated. As if the heat wasn't enough, she didn't have the proper tools to fix the problem, but Charlotte was no stranger to making do. A few moments later, a sleek Maserati pulled up beside her, its engine purring like a lion, in contrast to her own vehicle. Ethan Walker, the driver, stepped out. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his demeanor calm. Despite the situation, a striking figure of someone who never had to worry about car troubles, Charlotte determined not to let this mishap derail her, explained the issue, and without missing a beat, started working on the car. Ethan watched from the passenger seat as she worked with impressive speed and precision. His eyes, however, were drawn not only to her competence, but to the sparkling ring she wore on her left hand. The large diamond caught the sunlight, gleaming with an undeniable allure. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had never imagined that a woman in such a humble situation could afford a piece of jewelry so valuable. Intrigued, his thoughts turned to curiosity. As Charlotte tightened the last bolt on the engine, she glanced up at Ethan. Her expression was focused but soft, her movements effortless, as if she'd done this 1,000 times before. Ethan, who had spent most of his life surrounded by wealth and status, began to feel something stir inside him. He had always been used to people bending over backwards to help him, not the other way around. Yet here was a woman who, despite her circumstances, was doing everything she could to fix a problem without asking for anything in return. In that moment, Ethan was struck by the grace and strength Charlotte radiated. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply did what was needed. In stark contrast to the superficial relationships he was used to, Charlotte seemed to embody something real and raw. He had no idea who she was or what her story was, but it didn't matter. This encounter had sparked something in him, a feeling that he couldn't quite understand, but knew was significant. The blistering Texas sun beat down relentlessly as the heat waves rose from the cracked asphalt. Ethan's Maserati, which had been purring like a beast moments before, now sat still with white smoke billowing from under the hood. Charlotte, with a calm that surprised even Ethan, approached the car. As she knelt to inspect the engine, she looked up at Ethan with a quiet determination. "It's the cooling system," she said. "It's probably an easy fix." Ethan, unsure of what she was about to do, stepped back and let her work. In that moment, he was forced to let go of his usual control and trust in her abilities. Charlotte worked with focused precision, using tools from her car, improvising where needed. As the minutes passed, Ethan marveled at how quickly she managed to assess the situation and begin to fix the issue. His mind wandered to her background. Who was she? What had led her to this point? And most of all, why had she never sought help? The thought made him uneasy. As Charlotte tightened the final screw, Ethan felt a strange shift within himself. He had always prided himself on his intellect and resources, yet here was a woman who, despite her less privileged circumstances, was capable of handling a situation he would have found daunting. He watched her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. The scent of sweat and engine oil mixed with the harsh heat, yet Charlotte didn't seem to notice. She was simply doing what needed to be done. Ethan knew that this wasn't just an ordinary encounter. This wasn't a chance meeting. Something about Charlotte's strength, her resourcefulness, was pulling at him in a way he couldn't explain. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of respect for someone other than himself. This encounter, this moment in time, had shifted something inside him. The car was fixed. Charlotte wiped the sweat from her brow and stood up, stretching her arms. She smiled at Ethan, a simple but genuine smile. "That should do it. You're good to go," she said. Ethan, still processing everything, handed her a few bills as a token of gratitude, but Charlotte refused, shaking her head. "I didn't do it for money," she said. "I just wanted to help." Ethan's heart stirred. He had expected her to ask for something, anything. But here she was, rejecting his offer without a second thought. For a moment, Ethan just stood there staring at her with newfound respect. He realized that this woman had just taught him more in a few minutes than he'd learned in his entire life about humility, generosity, and selflessness. As he got into his car and watched Charlotte disappear down the road, Ethan felt a sense of unease and longing. He had never met anyone like her, someone who didn't rely on wealth or status to navigate the world. Charlotte had reminded him that there was more to life than the comforts he took for granted. Her quiet strength and unwavering resolve had left a lasting impression on him. Ethan had come across many people in his life, but none had made him question his own values like Charlotte Dawson. The relentless Texas sun beat down with a cruel intensity, its rays scorching everything in sight. The air shimmered with heat as it rose from the cracked asphalt. Charlotte Dawson, unfazed by the blistering weather, worked diligently under the hood of Ethan Walker's Maserati. Sweat dripped down her face, mixing with the dust and dirt as she expertly navigated the broken engine. Despite the oppressive heat, her movements were calm, methodical, and efficient. Ethan stood beside the car, his arms folded across his chest, watching her with admiration. He had grown accustomed to luxury and convenience. His world was one of ease, where problems were quickly solved with money or resources. But here, in this moment, Charlotte's quiet confidence and skill were a stark contrast to the privileges he had always known. She wasn't complaining about the heat. She wasn't looking for help. She simply worked, focusing on the task at hand, showing an inner strength that Ethan hadn't expected to see. His respect for her deepened with every passing minute. As Charlotte finished tightening the last bolt, she wiped the sweat from her brow and stood up, glancing at Ethan. Her face, though covered in grime and dust, was still serene, a quiet resilience in her eyes. The car was fixed, and the problem had been solved with little more than determination and resourcefulness. Ethan, standing in awe of what he had just witnessed, felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He approached Charlotte, his hand reaching into his pocket for his wallet. "You've done an incredible job," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "Please let me offer you something for your time." "It's the least I can do." But Charlotte shook her head, her gaze steady but polite. "I didn't do this for money," she replied softly. "I just wanted to help." Her words, simple yet powerful, struck Ethan deeply. She wasn't interested in reward or recognition. She had done it because it was the right thing to do, because she had the strength to handle whatever life threw her way without asking for anything in return. Ethan, however, wasn't ready to let it go. He felt a deep respect for her that he couldn't ignore, and something inside him stirred. "Please," he insisted, his voice firm but respectful. "At least let me do something for you. I can't just walk away and not show my appreciation." Charlotte hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's not that I don't appreciate your offer," she said, her voice gentle but resolute. "But I've worked hard for everything I have, and I don't want anyone thinking I do things for money. It's just who I am." Ethan took a step back, realizing the depth of her conviction. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't living off of handouts. She was self-sufficient, proud of her independence, and had a quiet dignity about her that Ethan found both humbling and inspiring. As Charlotte worked, she began to open up, sharing pieces of her life with Ethan. "Raising a child on my own isn't easy," she said, her voice soft, as she carefully wiped her hands on a rag. "There are days when I'm exhausted, when everything feels like it's too much to handle. But I keep going because I have to. My son deserves a future, and I'll do whatever it takes to give him one." Ethan listened intently, hearing the raw emotion in her words. He had never known the struggles of single parenthood, never experienced the pressure of providing for a child on his own. Charlotte's life wasn't easy, far from it, but she didn't let that stop her. She didn't use her hardships as an excuse or a reason to give up. She faced them head-on with determination and courage. As she spoke, Ethan began to understand that the strength she had was not just in fixing a car on the side of the road. It was in every decision she made, every sacrifice she had ever endured. Charlotte continued, revealing more about the life she led in her modest neighborhood. "We don't have much," she said, her tone matter of fact, "but we make it work. We get by because we have each other, and that's all that matters. Ethan felt a pang of guilt in his chest. He had spent so much of his life focused on material wealth, on accumulating more things, more status. He had never truly understood what it meant to live with so little to fight for every inch of progress. Charlotte's life was a stark contrast to his own, and it was in that contrast that Ethan saw the truth about his own privilege. He had taken so much for granted, never once questioning the ease with which his life had unfolded. But now, standing before Charlotte, he felt a shift. He felt an awakening in himself, a desire to change the way he viewed the world and the people in it. Ethan wasn't sure exactly what it was about Charlotte that had such a profound impact on him, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't walk away from this encounter unchanged. Charlotte had opened his eyes to the harsh realities of life, the struggles that so many people face every day without ever asking for sympathy or help. Her strength, her perseverance had shown him that there was more to life than the comforts he had known. As Charlotte gathered her tools and prepared to leave, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and admiration. He had never met anyone like her before, and he knew in that moment that this was a turning point in his life. He had witnessed something real, something that could not be ignored. Charlotte had taught him that true strength didn't come from money or status. It came from within. It was the quiet confidence that came from facing life's challenges head-on and continuing to move forward, no matter the odds. And Ethan vowed that he would never forget that lesson. Ethan Walker returned to his luxurious life, the sleek glass and steel high-rise in the heart of the city, standing as a symbol of his success. The quiet hum of the elevator, the polished marble floors, the expansive views from his penthouse window, it was all as it had always been. Yet despite the wealth that surrounded him, his thoughts constantly drifted back to Charlotte. The image of her covered in sweat, her hands deftly working on his Maserati, lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the memory of her quiet confidence and the strength that emanated from her without her uttering a single word. It was as if for the first time Ethan was seeing the world through a different lens. His mind wandered through the opulence of his life, but the sparkle of his riches began to seem hollow, lacking the depth he had once taken for granted. The more Ethan thought about Charlotte, the more he questioned the shallow relationships that had defined his world. He had always been surrounded by people, business partners, acquaintances, even friends, but none of them had ever made him feel the way Charlotte did. None of them had ever made him rethink his entire approach to life. In his world of money and power, he had always been surrounded by people who sought his approval or admired his success, but none had ever truly challenged him. Charlotte had come into his life so unexpectedly, yet her selflessness and integrity had shattered the illusions he had clung to for so long. What was the point of all his wealth if it didn't bring him closer to the kinds of values that Charlotte embodied? She had shown him that true strength wasn't about status and that real connections couldn't be bought. Her quiet dignity, her refusal to accept rewards for simply doing what was right, had stirred something deep within him. As the days passed, Ethan couldn't escape the feeling of disconnection that had begun to take root. He attended his high-profile meetings, dined at the finest restaurants, and lived in the most exclusive parts of the city, but none of it held the same appeal it once did. The people around him, so eager to please, began to seem like mere actors in a play going through the motions without any real substance. He had always believed that his success and the luxury he had surrounded himself with were the ultimate goals, that they were the keys to happiness. Yet as he sat in his penthouse on a quiet evening, he realized that the more he had, the less connected he felt to the world around him. Charlotte's selfless act of kindness had exposed a truth he couldn't ignore. The things he had long thought to be important didn't matter as much as he had once believed. His pursuit of material wealth had led him down a path that in the end left him feeling empty. The people in his life who had once seemed so important had begun to feel like fleeting shadows. Ethan found himself increasingly unable to relate to the world of luxury he had so carefully built. The lavish dinners, the expensive cars, the designer clothes they no longer brought him. The same joy his life had been about climbing higher, about always having more. But now it all seemed so superficial, so hollow. The world he had been striving to keep up with felt distant, like a bubble that was slowly beginning to deflate. Charlotte had shown him a life where happiness wasn't tied to wealth, a life where kindness, selflessness, and a sense of purpose took precedence. And in comparison, his life felt empty. He had realized that despite everything he had never felt truly connected to anyone or anything. The pursuit of success had come at the cost of meaningful relationships, of real human connections. Charlotte, with her quiet grace, had opened his eyes to this stark reality. As Ethan pondered his place in the world, his encounter with Charlotte began to take on a new meaning. He realized that she hadn't just fixed his car that day. She had fixed something within him. She had opened his eyes to a life of meaning, to the possibility of finding depth in the simplest of acts. Her actions had made him question everything he had once believed to be true about happiness. He had thought that happiness came with wealth, with status, and with power. But Charlotte had shown him that happiness was something different, something far more profound. It wasn't about what you had. It was about who you were and how you treated others. Her selflessness and quiet dignity had planted a seed in his mind, a seed that was slowly beginning to grow into something far more important than all the material possessions he had once obsessed over. For the first time, Ethan felt the stirrings of a desire to change. He wanted something more than the hollow relationships that had defined his life up until now. He wanted to connect with people who shared his values, people who cared not for his wealth, but for the person he truly was. He wanted to find meaning beyond the confines of his penthouse, and his board meetings, Charlotte had shown him that there was more to life than success. There was something deeper, something worth striving for. And as he sat by his window looking out at the skyline, Ethan knew that the life he had known was no longer enough. He was ready to embrace a new way of living, a way that didn't rely on the things he could buy, but on the relationships he could build and the values he could embrace. As the days passed, Ethan found himself unable to shake the thought of Charlotte. He had always been a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, whether it was through his wealth or his connections. Yet, when it came to Charlotte, his usual tactics felt irrelevant. He couldn't simply use his money and status to win her over. He knew deep down that she wasn't someone who could be impressed by luxury or grand gestures. For the first time, Ethan felt vulnerable. He had no idea how to approach her. He wasn't sure if she would even want to hear from him again. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became that if he wanted to reconnect with Charlotte, it would have to be on a completely different level. It couldn't be about him or his wealth. It had to be about something real, something genuine. Despite his reservations, Ethan finally decided to reach out to Charlotte. He sent her a simple message, something that wasn't about business or anything related to his wealth, but just a friendly gesture, an attempt to show her that he appreciated their brief encounter. It wasn't long before Charlotte responded her message, brief but polite, acknowledging his effort without much fanfare. It was clear she wasn't seeking any favors or flattery. Over the next few days, they began to exchange more messages, talking about everything from the weather to their favorite books. Their conversations casual but sincere. Ethan soon realized that for the first time in a long time, he was talking to someone who wasn't interested in his status. Charlotte wasn't looking for anything from him. She simply enjoyed connecting on a human level. As their communication continued, Ethan found himself becoming more and more drawn to Charlotte, not just because of her beauty or strength, but because of the honesty in their interactions. She didn't try to impress him, didn't put on any airs, and that was something Ethan hadn't experienced in a long time. As they spoke more, Charlotte began to share small pieces of her life with him. She told him about her struggles as a single mother, about the long hours she worked just to make ends meet, and about the dreams she held close to her heart. She spoke with a quiet strength, revealing her vulnerabilities, not in a desperate or self-pitying way, but in a way that made Ethan respect her even more. Charlotte's ability to open up to him, despite the walls she had built around herself, was something Ethan hadn't expected. He was struck by her resilience, her ability to stay grounded and focused on what truly mattered in life. Their conversations deepened as time went on, with Ethan learning more about Charlotte's life and the challenges she faced. Yet despite the growing connection between them, Charlotte remained cautious. She had no reason to believe that Ethan's feelings were anything more than a product of their unexpected encounter. Charlotte had been through enough to know that people, especially men like Ethan, often acted out of a sense of guilt or obligation, and she wasn't sure if his interest in her was genuine or just a passing curiosity sparked by the unusual circumstances of their first meeting. She appreciated the honesty in their conversations, but she couldn't ignore the lingering doubts in her mind. Was Ethan truly interested in her for who she was, or was he just looking for a way to make up for the uncomfortable position he had found himself in on that fateful day? Despite Charlotte's reservations, the bond between them continued to grow. They started to spend more time together, sometimes talking over the phone for hours or meeting for coffee on the weekends. With each conversation, Charlotte began to see a side of Ethan. She hadn't expected a man who was thoughtful, patient, and most surprisingly humble. He didn't talk about his wealth or success, but instead focused on getting to know her as a person. Ethan never pushed for anything more than a simple friendship, which made Charlotte begin to question her initial assumptions. Maybe there was more to him than his wealth and status, but still she couldn't fully let go of the doubts that clouded her heart. She knew she needed time to truly understand his intentions, to see if the connection they shared was real or if it was just another fleeting moment in the busy life they both led. As the weeks went by, Ethan continued to prove himself to Charlotte through his actions. He wasn't trying to buy her affection or sweep her off her feet with grand gestures. Instead, he showed up in small but meaningful ways, consistently being there for her when she needed someone to talk to or offering support when things got tough. It was clear that he valued their friendship, and slowly Charlotte began to trust him. Yet she still held on to her guard, unsure if she could ever fully let someone in again. Her life had taught her to be cautious, to protect her heart, especially when it came to someone like Ethan, whose world seemed so far removed from her own. But with each passing day, the connection between them grew stronger, and Charlotte couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something that could change both of their lives forever. After weeks of getting to know each other, Ethan found that his feelings for Charlotte had grown deeper than he had expected. It wasn't her modest background or her struggles that had captured his heart. It was her strength, her compassion, and the way she carried herself through life despite the challenges she faced. Ethan had been surrounded by superficial relationships for so long, but with Charlotte, things felt different. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or seeking something from him. She was genuine, and in her authenticity, he found something he had been searching for, someone he could connect with on a deeper level. One evening, after a particularly long conversation about their dreams and fears, Ethan finally confessed to Charlotte that he had fallen for her. It wasn't about her financial situation or her being a single mother. It was about her being the person she was. Her kindness, her resilience, and the way she made him see the world differently were the reasons he cared for her. He realized in that moment that what he truly wanted was to build a future with her, one that wasn't defined by status or money. Charlotte was taken aback by his admission, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't expected. She had spent so much of her life protecting herself, building walls around her heart to prevent anyone from getting too close. Life had taught her that trust was a fragile thing, and opening up to someone could lead to disappointment. But Ethan's words, his sincerity, pierced through those walls. She could see the truth in his eyes. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda. He wasn't offering her a life of luxury just because of who he was. He was offering her a partnership, a chance to share something real. Charlotte had always been cautious, afraid that love might just be another complication in her already challenging life. But Ethan made her feel safe, made her feel valued for the person she was not, for what she had or didn't have. Slowly, she let go of the doubts that had clouded her heart, and with a smile agreed to take a chance on a future with him. They both knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long while, Charlotte allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something beautiful. Together, they began to build a new life, one where love, honesty, and respect were the foundations. Ethan was no longer defined by his wealth, and Charlotte was no longer just the woman trying to get by. They found strength in each other in the way they complemented one another. Charlotte's hard work and dedication balanced Ethan's more laid-back approach to life, while Ethan's generosity and willingness to listen helped Charlotte feel heard in ways she hadn't experienced before. They weren't perfect, but they were perfect for each other. Their relationship wasn't built on the surface-level trappings of wealth or status. It was grounded in something real, something much deeper. It was built on shared values, mutual respect, and a love that grew stronger with every passing day. Together, they learned how to navigate life's ups and downs, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the triumphs. As they began this new chapter, Charlotte's son became an integral part of their relationship. Ethan, who had never been a father, was quick to step up and become a positive influence in the boy's life. Charlotte had always been protective of her son, wanting to shield him from anything that might disrupt the stability they had, but she could see how much Ethan cared. He didn't treat her son as a burden or an afterthought. He embraced him as a part of their family. They spent time together, building a relationship based on trust and care. Charlotte watched her heart swelling with pride as Ethan showed her son the same kindness he had shown her. It was a side of him that she hadn't seen before, and it only deepened her feelings for him. The bond between them all grew stronger, and for the first time in a long while, Charlotte began to feel like her little family was complete. The couple began to make plans for the future, not just for themselves, but for the life they wanted to create as a family. They talked about the kind of parents they wanted to be, the values they wanted to instill in Charlotte's son, and the kind of home they wanted to build together. The foundation of their relationship based on mutual respect. Love and understanding became the cornerstone of their plans. They weren't interested in the material. Things they wanted something deeper. Charlotte wanted to ensure that her son grew up with love and stability, and Ethan wanted to be a part of that. The wealth he had accumulated over the years no longer seemed as important as it once had. The life they were building was about more than money. It was about connection, family, and the kind of love that could weather any storm. As time went on, Ethan realized that his true wealth wasn't in the millions he had in the bank, but in the love he had found with Charlotte. He wasn't just a millionaire anymore. He was a partner, a father figure, and a man who had found something he hadn't known he was missing. Charlotte, too, realized that true happiness wasn't about how much she had, but about the love and support of the people who truly mattered. Together they created a life grounded in reality, one that wasn't defined by status or wealth, but by love, respect, and the desire to build something lasting together. Their journey, one that had started with an unexpected encounter on the side of the road, had blossomed into a future neither of them had anticipated, but both had always dreamed of a life filled with love, family, and endless possibilities. If you enjoyed this heartwarming journey of love, respect, and the unexpected twists that life can bring, make sure to subscribe to Deep Inside HQ for more captivating stories. Stay tuned for more incredible tales of real connections, powerful transformations, and inspiring journeys that will leave you with a renewed perspective on life. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join us in exploring deeper connections and real-life stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Let's continue this journey together, right here at Deep Inside HQ,